Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching. Whether you're watching live or you're watching the recording, thanks. I just appreciate you watching. Once again, everybody, thank you for joining me today for our live class. Very quick one today, just because we're just discussing the Begin Here module. So I just want to go through the Begin Here module really quickly. We're not going to do much different than what was in the orientation video. I am going to go into just a little more depth on a few things. But if you've watched the orientation video up to this point, you are in a good place. So I wouldn't, worry about things too much. But I'm going to click into the Begin Here module just so we can get going here. And so speaking of the orientation video, that's here at the top. If you want to have a look at that. You forget any of the things that we're going to be talking about during the live today. Of course, this will be recorded in the class as well. But, if you want the shorter version, you can just go here to the orientation. But as we're getting started, let me just go ahead and talk for just a brief moment about why I like to do these live classes the way that I like to do them. Some teachers like to do them via Zoom, some people through Teams. But for me, I've just found YouTube streams to be easier for a lot of people. Right? By and large, there was a study done a few years ago that said, 80% of people, when they are going to learn something for the first time, they go to YouTube first. So to some degree, I kind of see it as, coming to you all where you are. Like if you're already going to YouTube to learn things, why not, right? Just because that's kind of what we're familiar with. People are watching streams, whether they're watching them on Twitch or they're watching them on YouTube or where else ever, people might be watching live streams like this. And another big thing that I think probably is just as important, if not more so, is the fact that it's lower stakes in terms of interaction. Like you can still interact with me. You can still ask me questions. I am monitoring the chat. And I'm also monitoring Teams and email during this time as well. So if you want to send me a message through one of those platforms, you are welcome to do that as well. If you don't for whatever reason want to type in the YouTube chat. I think, especially for some people, like the stresses of like having to speak up and ask questions in, say, a Zoom session or a Teams meeting. I think that kind of stresses people out. And, you don't have to worry about having your camera on or anything like that. There's no such thing as that, with this. It's just me talking to you. And you have various means to ask me questions if you'd like to do so. And so that's sort of, that's the big driving reason behind why I like to do this the way that I like to do it. I'm Mr. Ramsey. Once again, just welcoming you to the course. I gave you my little intro spiel there in the welcome video that I sent out in the first Blackboard announcement in our Blackboard course. But I'm looking forward to working with everybody this semester. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again. I think everybody, if I remember correctly, everybody in the course has been in one of my courses previously. So I'm excited to work with you all again. And I'm excited to, do Web 140 with you all. Web 140 is a bit of a different class, right? You might have heard me refer to it as a catch-all class in one of the previous videos that I've sent out. The orientation or the welcome, right? It's sort of this class where There are all these little tools and all these little things that are important if you're going to go out and be a programmer or a web developer that really don't fit anywhere else. Right? Like if I have a class where I'm supposed to teach basic markup and scripting, for example, I don't necessarily have 2 weeks out of this class that I could use to teach you all Git and GitHub. And there are all these different frameworks and libraries and sub-languages that you might encounter in your web development experience just because they are used so often. But at the same time, I don't know that we need to spend a ton of time in other courses where these courses have things that are better to be done in them. Right? So that's kind of why we created Web 140 and we're doing it the way that we're doing it. A lot of different tools. And you can kind of see down the sidebar here all the different tools that we'll be looking at. Our first module, as with every module or as with every web course, this semester it starts off with just a refresher boot camp just to, bring you back up to speed on HTML and CSS. Remind you of the things that we were doing last year, and just so you can get some practice in with developing a website with files, right? Because that's going to be a big thing going forward. And then we use Git, which is version management. We'll be, we'll be working with that for a couple weeks. jQuery, which is a framework of JavaScript that is sort of outmoded, right? Like, it's not being used much anymore for new projects, I should say. It's not being used very much anymore for new projects. It's kind of taking a back seat in favor of other things like React. But one of the things that we talk about when we get to that module is how many websites use jQuery actively in 2023. Right? And the answer might surprise you. It's a bunch. I think even the Cleveland Community College website has a little bit of jQuery on it. Before it updated to the new site, it had a lot of jQuery in it. And, as you all know, like it's just been within the last year that website update has happened. But there are a ton of sites out there that are using jQuery. There are a ton of sites out there that are using Bootstrap, which is a CSS framework. Then using browser developer tools to do website testing and things of that nature. Using Canva, which is something that I brought into this course a little more recently, right? Because, one of the ideas here is that you could be a webmaster or, somebody who handles website things for, a small business, right? When it comes to like sort of the goal of the web program in this degree is that you could theoretically, right, go out and be like a webmaster for a small business in the area. And if you do that, if you are a webmaster for a small business in the area, you're oftentimes given all these other tasks to go along with it because you're the guy that knows computers, right? You're the person that knows computers. And so, they might say, oh, I want this graphic here. I need a graphic to do this, or oh, we need to make this for social media, right? And so, I wanted to talk about graphic creation and how we use graphics on the web a little bit more, but didn't really have a place for it. So we put Canva in here so you can get a little experience with graphic creation. And Module 7 is CSS preprocessors. We specifically talk about SAS, SASS, not to be confused with SAAS, SAS. And so these are different types of CSS preprocessors that are, it's becoming outmoded with changes in CSS, but these are things that you're still going to see when you're working in legacy systems. And so if you go into a job interview, I want you all to be able to know what they're talking about when they ask you about these things. And I want you all to be able to at least have some experience with working with them. So, we're not spending a ton of time on really any one thing, especially when it comes to these, older frameworks and libraries that aren't really being used a lot anymore for new projects. But it's still important that you know them because they're still out there, right? Like that's one of the things that we kind of have to deal with as web developers. Is it's kind of like being an auto mechanic as far as all that goes. Like you have to know how to fix a 2013 model, just the same as you'd need to know how to fix like a 1970 model, right? So if you're a web developer, you need to know how to, work on and fix a website that was built in 2023. But you'd also need to know how to work on and deal with a website that was built in 2007, right? And as we know, those can be very, very different websites. But let's just go through this material here really quickly. Once again, I'll stress the EVA. I think everybody's completed it now. I haven't gone back and looked through again today yet, but I believe everybody's completed the EVA, so thank you all for that. If you haven't, for whatever reason yet, please make sure you do that as soon as possible. The getting started here with just information about how to get the stuff. Like I think everybody in this class, since it's a second year class, and I've seen you all before, I think you all know how to do this. This stuff that's in here, but it's here if you need it, right? Don't forget that. And the syllabus. And so we'll read the course description here. It says this course provides an introduction to web development tools. Topics include creating websites using web development tools and web standards. Upon completion, students should be able to create small websites and upload files to a web server. And so we have sort of taken this and adapted it to be something kind of modern. I mean, we're going to be creating files. We're going to be uploading them to a server. We're going to be hosting them on a server, even though it's not going to be a traditional server stack like we're used to. Maybe from some other courses, but we are going to be doing that with Git and GitHub and GitHub Pages. And you can see here that this description is pretty broad, right? So, we can do a lot of stuff here with this description. Makes life easy on us. We'll let you go ahead and go through and kind of read everything in the syllabus on your own time. If you have any questions about anything in there, just let me know. But I think it's all fairly clear, right? It's all pretty standard. Here's our due dates and pacing guide. So you can see when every module is assigned and when every module is going to be due. You can also see that around the time of breaks, I've tried to, give you all a little bit of extra time. Right, so like that module 4 there, which encompasses the first week of October, which is fall break, you can see that that's a pretty long module there. And then module 7 there, which is which encompasses the end of November, which is Thanksgiving. You can see that's a pretty long module there. And the idea behind doing that is to give you all the time off if you want it, right? Like you can take a break in the middle there. I'm not going to teach anything during those weeks of break. If you want to take a break during that time and not worry about anything, if you want to, try to get caught up during those times, that's great. It's just all up to you all in terms of what you want to do for those things. That's one of the luxuries moving the online into 16-week sections gives us, is the ability to do that, right? Because normally, when we shrink it down to 14 weeks, we kind of have to ignore the breaks so we can get everything in. But now with a longer time span, you all can have the time too. In general, I do not accept late work. We'll go ahead and make that clear. If you communicate with me and prior to the due date and you say, something, this happened, or you don't even have to really go into any sort of detail, right? Just give me a heads up that you're, dealing with something and need an extension, and I'll give you an extension, right? Like, to me, I sort of like to treat it like the real world, right? Like, I think about it as if my boss came to me and said, like, I want this thing done by this particular day, and then that day comes and goes, and he never hears anything from me, and the thing that he wanted done doesn't get done, well, then I get in a whole lot of trouble, right? But if I go to them, a week or two into the project before the date it's due, and I say, look, we've been working on this, we've run into a couple things, can we get an extension on that date? They're usually, more than accommodating to be able to make that happen, just because, things happen. I understand it, right? Like, everybody's got their own situations, everybody's got their own stuff going on. If you need the time, we can take the time. We can work on it. Now, it does say here that I do not give grades of incomplete, and they are getting more strict about incomplete here. So that should be noted. We have been informed recently that unless you have completed at least 70% of the class and are passing the 70% of the material that you have completed, we can't even consider incompletes. Right? That's just sort of the way that it is now. So you want to be mindful of that. My information's here since I took my new role, as I mentioned in the orientation. I don't have regular student hours anymore. Those are all by appointment now. But I am here. I am available. My office has changed. It's upstairs in the Hunt building now. Pretty easy to find. Some people have had some trouble finding it, but it is overall, I think it's pretty easy to find. If you need directions, just let me know. I have a little map that I drew out to help people find me. If you need to come visit me for whatever reason. But you can always send me a Teams message, send me an email. Those are the things that I prefer when it comes to communication, because I always have those on me, right? Like, with other stuff, I'm in and out to meetings, I'm doing this thing and that thing. But I always have email on me, and I always have Teams on me in some form or fashion. So feel free to send me messages using either of those means, and it'll be all right. Live online class, that's what's happening right now, 4 o'clock p.m. on Tuesdays. Some more stuff to read. Another little welcome to the online course. That just gives you best practices for taking online. Again, most of you have already taken online classes before. You know this stuff. You've probably even seen this video before. So, we won't spend any time on it. The final project we'll spend a little bit of time on. So as I mentioned in the orientation guide, I like to wait until the end of the census or the end of the Begin Here modules, if everybody's done the EVA activity, before I finalize the final project. It's going to be basically the same, but it is a group project. All right, I haven't decided if I want to do just one big team for this course yet, or two smaller teams. If I do one big team, that means that some people will have to do the roles twice. So we might have, for example, 2-person 3s. Or 2-person 2s. Something that I will also typically do in those situations where there's a larger team is I will make one person the group leader, and instead of the group leader having to take multiple roles, their only responsibility is maintaining basically doing project management and maintaining the GitHub and doing pull requests on the GitHub, which you don't know what that means yet, but you will. So we'll finalize that next week. So we'll talk about it. After I finalize it, we'll talk about it in next week's live. We've got some time anyway, right? Since next week is the refresh bootcamp week. I might have. Do I have anything about? Yeah, no, we don't have a. There is no final project check-in that week. I don't think I do any final project check-ins. Yep. So the first final project check-in is at the end of module 2. I'll just need to know what everybody's role is, and I'll need to see the GitHub created. So that's pretty easy enough. So we'll talk about, once we get everything finalized, make sure everybody's going to stay in the class and everything's cool. We'll talk about all of that at the start of next week's live class. And I'll update it here as well. But as I mentioned during the orientation video, even though it is a group project, you don't really have to do a whole lot of group interaction. Like there's no requirement to meet in person. One of the big parts about this whole course is that you can do work remotely and share work remotely. Like that's part of the point of GitHub and Git that we'll be talking about in module 2. So for all intents and purposes, like you could do this group project and never actually save like 1 or 2 sentences in like an email chain or a Teams message or something. Never actually talk to anybody else in your group. Just, sort of just as long as you do your role and make sure that it gets in there, then you're good. But one of the cool things is that when I use Git, and I can pull up GitHub here, when we use Git and GitHub, one of the cool things about this is that I can sort of deal with this stuff to see your contributions. Let me see if I have one here that would be easy to show you that I've done in the past. Maybe not. We can just look at one of my GitHub repos here that I did for this past spring. But if I look, so this is what a GitHub repo looks like. We'll talk more about this in module 2. And they're public, right? Like anybody can come here and see this code that I wrote. And one of the cool things that anybody can do is if I go into the pull requests, or actually it's not the pull request, it is it's here with the commits. If I go into the commits, I can see every commit that was made, and I can see who made it. So everybody would be responsible for, committing their own parts of the project to the project, and so I can actually see who does it, and all that kind of stuff. We'll talk about more with module 2. No need to really worry about that now. And so that leaves us with the discussion board. You got to introduce yourself, and the orientation quiz. Those are the assignments here that you want to make sure that you do. But that's it. Right? That's everything in a nutshell. So we will we'll go ahead and wrap up here. I think that's plenty. If you have any questions or anything, send me an email, send me a Teams message, and we will get things squared away for you. So with that being said, we'll meet back next week, and we'll talk a little bit about the website bootcamp module. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you next time.